Sociopathy.
Yes. What is sociopathy? That is the question here, which can only be answered in such a way that it is nothing other than an abnormal, degenerate behavior of a human being incapable of any form of empathy and sense of guilt towards fellow human beings. Basically, a sociopathic person is someone who has an antisocial personality disorder and is unable or only able to a very limited extent to empathize with the thoughts and feelings of another human being, and to understand their creative energy processes, that is to say, their thoughts, feelings, emotions, and sensations. This indicates and testifies to an inability in this respect, as a result of which there is absolutely no willingness or ability to perceive, recognize, empathize with, and understand the personality traits of other human beings, which can simply be described as an inability to feel. Sociopathic people therefore completely lack the normal emotional empathy, social empathy, and cognitive empathy, as a result of which they are unable to empathize with other human beings and even judge and treat them from above. And they do this in such a way that they, the sociopath, thereby create a sense of well-being for themselves and are indifferent and selfish towards their fellow human beings, while always putting their own well-being at the center. In addition, they talk often and a lot, immediately interfere in other people's conversations with lowly intelligent remarks, are unable to limit themselves to what is important when talking a lot, but chatter constantly and a lot of unnecessary things, thus prolonging their speeches, so that, for example, something that could be said in less than a minute or explained in 2 minutes takes 10 minutes or even longer. They also keep on talking and talking about the same thing that has been mentioned, even if everything that needs to be said has already been said and clarified. They just go on chatting endlessly and do not find an end, and do not realize that everything that needs to be said has been said. But sociopaths do not realize this because they are so full of themselves, which they usually do not realize themselves, that they do not realize that they believe themselves to be much more important than all other human beings, whom they treat as if they were heir to them as a result of their arrogance. However, it is the case, and they do not think about this in any wise, that they could not live without this air, no matter how it is also seen. The way a sociopath should be confronted is to treat him absolutely and in every case and without exception as what he is one way or another, namely a human being. But the way they are confronted is such that it must always be appropriate. Behavior towards a sociopath is simply appropriate, without any aggression, calmly and at an appropriate distance, because human beings who are sociopaths react sensitively to being met aggressively or intrusively. Sociopaths have an antisocial personality and a corresponding demeanor and behavior, which is not exactly easy to encounter. For this reason, it is counseled to react calmly and behave calmly, in a form of psychologically good behavior. It is always good and also correct to behave logically in an interaction, that is to say, in a reciprocal relationship with a sociopathic human being for self-protection, in such a way that, if necessary, a clear statement of one's own needs and ideas is made in a clear voice and manner of expression. The wording must be clear, factual, unambiguous, and also well-founded, but should never correspond to a justification, because such a justification is always wrong and absolutely reveals one's own inability, helplessness, and insecurity, and leads to the sociopathic human being gaining the upper hand. It is therefore important for every human being to be open, correct, and confident when dealing with a sociopath, and also to make their own legitimate might clear. However, it is important to always allow such human beings to save face, also when their behavior has been seen through. However, if this is disregarded, then this is evidence of their own sociopathic tendencies, and usually also leads to aggression, hatred, and violence being triggered in the sociopath. A sociopathic human being is always and without exception more or less psychopathic to a certain extent, whereby it is always important for human beings afflicted with sociopathy to keep a low profile in this regard. It is therefore also better to ask the sociopath in one case or another before releasing any information yourself. This is true even if it is harmless things that are being discussed, because the sociopathic human being always wants to be right and more knowledgeable than the other person. However, if you have to deal with a sociopathic human being, or even have to live with one, it is important to always maintain a serious facial expression and to maintain eye contact throughout any conversation with them, as well as to also ensure a firm gait and an upright posture, as this not only shows confidence, but also steadfastness and strength. If earthly humanity is examined and analyzed very closely, it becomes clear that there are far more sociopaths running around in every society than is generally assumed. In particular, the rich, the educated, and scientists are widespread in every society, although this is also common in working class and teaching circles. According to Plearen's research, that is to say, SFATH's data, in the 1940s, around 1.6% of the world's 2.6 billion human beings were affected by this type of behavior. This is now the case in 2024, when 9.44 billion human beings populate the Earth, around 18 times more than the planet, all ecosystems, and therefore all of nature with fauna and flora, the atmosphere and the climate could have coped with without suffering damage, but which was made impossible by the senselessness and irresponsible breeding of overpopulation, and the planet and all ecosystems were harassed and largely destroyed. Only the gods know this, who are just as fictitious and imaginary as the non-existent logic, the alleged intellect, and the unfortunately only fictitious reason of the earthling. The religious or secular delusion of faith, which is built solely on lies and deceit, and which the human beings of Earth are rapturously defending to the hilt in this greatest giant swindle ever constructed, will unfortunately keep the majority of Earth's humanity waiting a very long time for logic, understanding, and reason, and consequently true love, peace, and real freedom will have to wait many centuries and even longer. This is because the truth is frowned upon, and earthlings have been addicted to delusion since time immemorial through religious and secularly fabricated and false stories. Earth's humanity, the majority of earthlings, who have fallen prey to delusional faith, want to be lied to and deceived because in their illusory thinking they are incapable of logic, understanding, and reason, but only believers who accept and defend as truth all lies and deceptions that have been thrown at them since ancient times. These believers, the majority of Earth's humanity, are nothing other than human beings who only practice a sham thinking based on didacticism, based on literalism in such a way that they simply believe what is written, such as in a book, in a brochure, on a flyer or poster, but also in a letter or in the form of a note, etc. These human beings are therefore literalists. These human beings are therefore literalists, that is to say, orthodidacts who, as a result of a self-imposed compulsion, vehemently devour the written word and imagine that only the written word is absolutely based on logic, understanding, and reason, and is therefore the effective truth. In addition to the orthodidacts, the word believers and factual believers should also be mentioned, whereby the word believers swear that everything they are told and told corresponds to the truth, without doubting it, if it is lies and deception, and without also giving a second thought to whether it is the truth, simply a fib or a deliberate deception or lie. Every word is simply accepted and believed as the effective truth without thought, reflection, or scrutiny, regardless of whether it relates to religious or purely secular matters. Quite simply, every word is taken unchecked by faith as effective truth and passed on in this way as an unconscious lie, so that the next human being, who is also a believer in words, also unconsciously becomes a liar by faith and passes on what he has been told and heard, in the belief that it is based on truth, although on closer examination it becomes clear that every word is absolutely a lie. The factual believers should also be mentioned, which can be found, for example, especially among human beings who are interested in archaeology, history, or simply antiquity, etc. They unscrupulously create truths that they concoct from assumptions and conjectures, disseminate them as proven truths written in books, or teach them at schools or seminars, and thus mislead those interested in these things. This, however, when taken seriously and judged correctly, is nothing other than lying and deception, namely 1. Lying to and deceiving oneself with regard to one's own personality, and 2. Lying to and deceiving interested fellow human beings who believingly fall for lies and deceptions based only on assumptions and suppositions and believe them as the bare coin of truth, and without consciously wanting to do so, and therefore unconsciously, advocate them in a lying and deceptive manner. But an ancient proverb says, "The human being wants to be lied to and deceived because the truth is too trivial for him." But let us get back to the actual topic and take a closer look at the average sociopath, who, it must be clearly explained, does not necessarily have to be a bad human being, and who can behave reasonably normally or quite harmoniously with individual or whole groups of other human beings. As a rule, he is often annoying and frequently indelicate, interfering in conversations in a nerve-wracking, ill-considered manner and with lowly intelligent and even stupid objections and remarks. His lowly intelligent and impudent character disorder and bad behavior does not necessarily conceal a degenerate murderer, rapist, or thief. However, it is possible that in many cases it is a human being who also has mental disorders and is not aware of them in any wise. However, in this form, of which there are many different types, it means something worrying either way, as with every form of sociopathy, because there is inevitably always suppressed aggression lurking behind it, which can harbor a certain degree of danger under certain circumstances. However, this is fundamentally different in every sociopath with or without any psychopathic background, and so everyone is controlled according to the nature of their character damage and thus their personality disorder. Something is always and in every case present, also in a minimal wise, namely a certain dangerousness, which can be quite unpleasant for certain fellow human beings or the entire social environment. This is because the personally misguided behavior of a sociopath is unpredictable. This is because the sociopath's entire behavior is geared solely and without exception towards their own personal interests and their general well-being in any form, and they are completely indifferent to the well-being of others. Overall, for an effective sociopath, his fellow human beings are merely uneducated followers, while he considers himself to be infallible and perfect, and believes that he alone is entitled to all rights to be treated well. They also believe that they are entitled to exercise such dominion over fellow human beings that they appear to be their personal slaves, regardless of whether they are their own partner or family members, any work colleagues, female or male colleagues, or friendships and acquaintances, relatives, foreigners or superiors, etc. A sociopath, male or female, claims the right to systematically deceive fellow human beings, to betray and also deceive them, and even to take advantage of them in an evil way, to harm and exploit them in any wise. And they usually do this so deceitfully that those affected do not realize it at first, and if they do, they can hardly find a way to break away from the sociopath again, especially if a dependent, love relationship or other bond has arisen from the relationship. It is not uncommon for such a relationship in such a partnership to become a life in hell for the disadvantaged party, which cannot be dissolved due to not daring out of fear, threats, physical violence, emotional abuse, sexual violence, dependency, or out of false love or shame. This can take many different forms, characterized by verbal violence of all kinds and shades, such as verbal abuse, mental cruelty, embarrassment, mockery, blackmail, constant control, jealousy, character assassination, ignorance and slander, shouting, humiliation, rejection, accusations of guilt, death threats, intimidation, manipulation, withdrawal of love, ignorance, insults, bullying, constant criticism, silence, belittling, that is to say, humiliation, arguments, terrorizing, neglect, disregard, scathing looks, insults and ridicule, etc. All of this leads to a loss of appetite or, conversely, to frustrated eating in those affected, usually women, but not infrequently ultimately to suicide or even murder and manslaughter. It is only rarely the case that human beings intuitively recognize sociopaths, contrary to other claims by psychologist experts that there are more and more human beings who intuitively recognize sociopaths. However, this is not because people are developing more intuitive abilities, but because the ever-growing overpopulation means that more human beings are populating the world, which in turn means that more human beings with intuitive abilities are appearing on the scene. In other words, it is not more human beings who are developing intuitive abilities, but rather more of them are appearing as a result of the irrational and completely irresponsible growth of humanity. Basically, the human being of today and tomorrow is becoming more and more ignorant, uncreative and non-thinking, and therefore lowly intelligent, and is becoming more and more addicted to illusory thinking, as has been the case with religious belief since time immemorial, as a result of which the intuitive abilities of human beings are becoming more and more atrophied. As a result, the values of honor and dignity also atrophy and are replaced by indifference and even criminality and crime, as well as alcoholism, drug addiction, and fanaticism. This, as well as in the form of observing and admiring those human beings who still endeavor to produce some kind of achievement themselves, such as in sport, acting, etc., in respect of which the great and good are exalted and howled to the skies, while nothing is done and achieved themselves, but only others are exalted. Now, what needs to be explained further is this. Normally, intuitively inclined people, in relation to the overpopulation, are only few in number, and therefore an accumulation of them in one place only results because the overpopulation only makes more known, as do also many more sociopaths, because the more human beings inevitably make more appearances. But the ability of intuitiveness does not become more widespread, that is to say, resettles in human beings. The ability to grasp something intuitively is an ability of a minority of human beings who, as a result of the clarity of their very own conscious attitude to truth, perceive feelings and sensations that are not preceded by any conscious thoughts or illusory thoughts, but which enable judgments, certain knowledge, and precise and clear conclusions about a fact, but which are by no means based on assumptions and opinions. Intuition is the ability of human beings to subconsciously and consciously perceive something in terms of feelings, sensations, and emotions, without any preceding concrete thoughts or also desires, etc. This is an ability of only a minority of human beings. However, this is only an ability of a minority of human beings who cultivate their intelligentum. So it is not possible for normal human beings because they only indulge in illusory thoughts and their intelligentum diminishes and even partially atrophies. Sociopaths of both sexes are being recognized less and less, which means that there are also more and more broken family relationships, frequent changes of partnerships and friendships, etc., as well as lying, thievery, cheating, criminality, and crime, and thus murder and manslaughter, war and terror. It should also be noted elsewhere, which apparently goes unnoticed by the knowing, loud-mouthed scientists in charge, that the ecological carrying capacity of the planet and the entire habitat of all living beings, human beings, creatures, all other living and self-moving life forms, as well as all the largest plants, such as the seagrass Posidonia australis and the giant trees Sequoia dendron giganteum, which grow to about 100 meters tall, down to the smallest plant found in the world to date, the globular duckweed Wolfia globosa, which grows to approx. 0.5 millimeters in size, is not only decreasing in size but has already been partially destroyed. Now, with regard to sociopaths, it is a fact that they bring at least sorrow, but also discord and unhappiness, to their own families and also to fellow human beings in general, if they are able to act in their wise way. Very often, there are quite nasty sociopaths in the ranks of those in power, and also in the authorities, who are constantly bringing about new ordinances, regulations and laws, etc., and thus restricting the freedom and rights of citizens more and more, allowing them to be controlled more and more by the security services, secretly observing, spying on, and harassing citizens if they do not suit the authorities concerned for whatever reason. It would be very important to recognize these sociopaths before they are elected, appointed or otherwise smuggled in and placed in positions in government or the authorities, etc. Unfortunately, however, the people are incapable of doing this, so they elect persons to government and public authorities, etc., who are unfit for office and self-serving. This is because the citizens are uneducated and blind in their judgment of those who are to be elected to the leadership and administrative positions of the nations. Therefore, it is also possible that the quite dangerous antisocial behavior of sociopaths in governments, state administrations, and in the authorities, etc., is gaining the upper hand, whereby the sociopathically active can plunge their peoples into misfortune, such as through wars and other terror. This also makes it possible for more and more new laws, regulations, punishments, and insane decrees, etc., to be imposed on the people, as well as curtailing their freedom and robbing them of their rights as human beings and citizens. It would therefore be urgently necessary for the people, before they elect and appoint any elements in the form of sociopaths and psychopaths to governments, authorities and administrations, etc., to first learn to understand human nature, and thus prevent such elements, such as sociopaths and psychopaths, from coming to the helm of governments, authorities, supervisory organizations, associations, security bodies, law enforcement agencies, administrations, or societies, or from acting as supervisory bodies, etc.
Simyase Silver Star Center, the 20th of January, 2024, 1850 hours, Billy.